to the 87th episode of Fruity Knitting. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Andrew.
And we've had an extraordinary time since we saw you last. We've just come back from Shetland, where we were covering the 10th annual Shetland Wool Week Festival, as well as interviewing various local and visiting talents from the knitting and fibre community. And by the way, I'm feeling much better, so thank you so much for your messages and well wishes. It was really heartwarming to receive them. It was great. We did have a really heavy schedule. We were literally working from the first day we arrived, starting with an interview after getting straight off the overnight ferry. We kind of continued on with that pace to the very last day. So we did 9 interviews, as well as recording quite a lot of extra footage. So as a result, we've got lots of great content, which we're very eager to share with you over the next few episodes. But in this episode, we're featuring an all Shetland cast, which is actually quite easy to do because the islands are really filled with fantastic knitting and crafting talent.
Yeah, that's right. So first up, Andrea's put together a 15-minute collage of some of the highlights of the festival, including scenes from the opening ceremony. We've got some of the social gatherings, some of the exhibitions, and also, of course, the stunning Shetland landscape. Yeah. Later in the show, we're featuring the incredibly talented young Shetland lace knitter Lauren Anderson in our segment Knitters of the World. Lauren's only 21 years old, but she's already gathering prizes at the local craft shows. As you'll see, she does come from a long line of expert lace knitters.
Yeah, and our Makers segment is also included. We're featuring Wendy from Burra Bears. Wendy makes really gorgeous teddy bears from knitted feral fabrics, and her bears are actually quite famous and they travel all around the world, so you'll really enjoy getting to see how they're made. And finally, we're meeting, or Hazel Tyndall is going to join us again. She's been on the show a couple of times before, and she's going to share some more of her expert Shetland knitting knowledge. And she also shows us in a lot of detail exactly how she knits so fast using her Shetland knitting belt. So that's really inspiring.
That's really cool. Yeah, but let's jump straight into our Shetland Wool Week collage. If you weren't able to attend the festival in person, then we really hope that this footage lets you share in the experience from afar. And if you were there, we hope it helps keep memories alive and maybe share them with family and friends. We'll see you back here very soon.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very warm, being the operative word, welcome to Shetland Wool Week 2019. I believe that 10th anniversaries are traditionally celebrated with tin, but for this week only, we're celebrating with wool, aren't we? Definitely, yeah. So you're in for a very fine evening of entertainment. About an hour and a half long. We've got lots of look backs at how Shetland Wool Week has evolved over the last decade. We've got some super Shetland music, hot from Edinburgh Military Tattoo. And we're going to take a mass photo. How many knitters can we fit in one image is our question this evening. We're going to aim for the 500 mark, so... Now, for loads of you here, patently, one of the key features of Wool Week is the patron and that all-important hat. For the 10th anniversary year, we decided to bring together lots of those patrons just for a look back at how this amazing festival has evolved over the past decade. So patrons have built the event using the hats that they've designed. The patterns have been distributed to all of you wonderful visitors. And of course, you have more than brought us the goods in turning up at each opening ceremony, beautifully attired in your creations.
Hazel, where's the cap? Well, I somehow missed the instruction to bring along a hat.
Too busy knitting.
Well, and then I don't have one because my hats have all swooped off.
Is that what the name came for, Hazel?
It was spared to Shetland and Wool Week, so yeah. But there's one in Jimieson's window, there's one at the Textile Museum, and the rest, I don't know where they're at.
I'll better put it on. So, Donna, you are the Babel lady.
I am, yes.
And what did it mean to you to be patron of Wool Week in 2015?
Well, it was a huge honour and a amazing privilege, really, to be asked. I was actually quite shocked when I got that email, to tell you the truth, but it's so much has changed since then, and really my whole, I suppose, business has been built up since then, so it's been really amazing.
I'm originally from Shetland, so even though I've travelled from America, where I live now, and when I was probably about 3 or 4, we lived out in Sandnes in a renovated croft house called Little Booster. And then 15 years ago, my parents retired back to Shetland, and they bought the croft house across the little bay from Little Booster called Muckle Booster. So I decided this had to be called a Booster Beanie.
Makes perfect sense. So, will we see more of Shetland in your future designs, Gudrun?
Absolutely. I am currently working on a collection that's based on knitwear that my mum designed in the 70s here in Shetland. So that will be launching next year at Shetland Wool Week.
And I've just got to show you this seamlessly, that this is a watercolour painting of all the designs of all of the hats that the patrons have created over the years. Each patron will receive a printed copy. Thank you so much.
It's just amazing, this. When I spoke at the very first Wool Week, it was in the museum, and it was in the boat hall, and there was about 30 people. And looking at you all, this is a fitting tribute to a great community event. The community's got together, and it really is amazing. And words fail me here. My beanie tells a story which is a way of life in Shetland. I come from a family of crofter fishermen on the island of Burra. And in the summer months, Dad would go to the Hearn. Mum would do the marking and do the croft work with her dad. And they did all the work to Pete Hill. And so basically, croft and fishing was what I grew up with. A lot of Shetlanders were.
And the campaign for wool, is
Yep.
that something you feel able to just tell everybody about?
We are delighted that HRH, the Prince of Wales, has recognised our efforts in Shetland. He's written a foreword in this year's Shetland Wool Week Annual, which reflects this, and also has recorded a very special video message for us, which we would like to play for you now. I actually met him in 1999 at the opening of Hunter's Wool Mill, and I nearly missed the meeting. I was through the back in the warehouse, and they came running for me, and I was last in the line. And I couldn't believe how much he knew about Shetland sheep and wool. And they told me that he's a farmer, and he has a great interest and passion for wool.
The official meeting point and relaxing area for all the knitters is the hub at the Shetland Museum and Archives, and lots of knitters said they just really enjoyed hanging out here and meeting people from all around the world. There was also live entertainment at certain times of the day. And on the walls were a few exhibitions. These ceramic works show the ear markings that are used to identify sheep, and this practice is believed to have started in Shetland in the 17th century, and it's also done by traditional reindeer herders in Sweden. This exhibition shows Deborah Gray's work as an artist in residence at the Icelandic Textile Centre. Deborah wanted to show the influence of the land and climate on the local Icelandic sheep fleeces, so she separated the tog and pell fibres and hand-spun them before recombining them to create different novel yarn structures, and these swatches here are together with photographs of the landscape where the sheep originate. Each year, the Shetland Wool Week releases an annual which also includes a collection of knitting patterns, mainly from previous Shetland Wool Week patrons, but also from other designers who have supported the Wool Week over the years.
Hi, I'm Kay from London, and this is my 4th Shetland Wool Week. And the highlight for me this year is that I've learned something new, and it's called thrum knitting, where you knit really cozy hand mittens with fleece inside, and that was great. Another highlight for me was when we went to Unst. We went to a place called the Unst Boat Haven, and there I learned about the changes in population in the island from 3,000 in the 19th century to about 600, between 600 and 700. So I've got to know more about the island this time round.
Hello everyone, my name's Heidi. I come from Luton. It's about 30 miles north of London. This is my second Shetland Wool Week. I had such a great time last year. I've come again this year. I like it because I meet up with my knitting friends from Ravelry. We're quite a eclectic global group. we have knit-alongs, and Kay and I are wearing the same sweater today. Not by design, but that's how we are. Yesterday I went to Unst also. It was wonderful, really beautiful island, but best of all with the experienced old lady knitters there, who taught me to use a knitting belt. Now, I've got arthritis in my knuckles and in my shoulder, and it's quite painful sometimes to knit. But with the knitting belt, I reckon I've got another 20 years of knitting. It's good, solid, 8-hour-a-day knitting in me, so that's great.
My name is Susie Savadnik, and I'm from Florida. This is my first trip to Shetland Wool Week, and I have really enjoyed it. I've met people from all over the world, and the only thing we really have in common is knitting, but we can end up talking for hours because knitting has been such a really great connection. Yesterday we went to the island of Bresse, which was fascinating. There are more sheep than people, and sheep are everywhere on the island with just a few homes, but it seems to kind of combine the modern and the ancient, and it was just beautiful, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I especially enjoyed seeing the sheep fleeces. Some people were buying those. It was very exciting.
Hi, I'm Julia. I live in Leicester in the UK, and this is the 4th time that I've been to Wool Week.
Hi, I'm Joanna. I'm from Aberdeen in the UK, and this is my 3rd time at Wool Week.
I actually really love that you can just come and sit in the hub and knit and talk to absolutely anybody. Everybody's wearing stuff they've knitted. It's just a really friendly atmosphere.
And my highlight this Wool Week has been a dyeing class by Rhea Burns, learning new techniques and using materials that you'd have in your kitchen or in your garden.
In the foyer of the museum was an exhibition inspired by knitted lace and concrete. The artist is Susan Pearson, and these sculptures are based on a true story of the illegitimate child of a laird of Walsey, known as the Laird's Witch. Her name was Kitty, and she was very clever and studious and made a living practicing witchcraft. And the contrast between the fragile beauty of a knitted lace hap and the brutal practicality of concrete probably fairly accurately reflect Kitty's life. welcome back. We hope you really enjoyed that. I loved that last scene of the sheep coming down the hill. It was a really quite a magical scene and really special that I managed to capture it on camera. We had a couple of hours free, so we decided we'd go for a drive and take a walk in some lonely moorland area. And so we went to a place near Vementry, for those of you who know Shetland. And I left Andrew by himself because he wanted to record a couple of welcome messages to patrons, and I thought I'll just clear my head and go for a walk. And after a while, I heard this car horn beeping continuously, and I started to get really worried that we'd left our rent-a-car in the wrong position. So I hurried back across the moorlands, wondering what's happening, and then I just got up to the top of the hill and I saw in the distance that all of these sheep were being herded down the road. And my hands were actually freezing cold and stiff, and I was fumbling around with our camera, which was really playing up. It was refusing to focus. And every few seconds, the sun was popping out from behind the clouds. So 1 minute it would be behind the clouds and really dark, and then 3 seconds or 4 seconds later, it's overexposed and light. So I'm putting the aperture up and down and fumbling around and just praying I'd get this camera ready by the time the sheep came around the corner, because I couldn't get them to do a retake for me. That was out of the question. And I just got the camera ready and the sheep came around the corner, and I was able to just capture that really timeless scene. It was beautiful. I mean, the tractor wasn't timeless, but everything else about the picture was.
Yeah, and the dogs were in there.
Yeah, that was great.
You will have seen that the opening ceremony included a short recorded message from the Prince of Wales. Unfortunately, we weren't able to use that footage, but we did want to give you a little bit of background on that. Prince Charles initiated the campaign for wool in 2010, and the aim of the campaign was to promote the benefits of wool in all of its different uses. So fine clothing, of course, but also things like carpet and even insulation. And it's interesting to see that the issues that he was concerned about back then, which were largely around sustainability and the problems with synthetic fibres, are exactly the topics that we're tackling today. So that was a lot of foresight there. I also thought it was worth noting that Prince Charles managed to impress Oliver Henry with his knowledge of Shetland sheep. Oliver Henry actually started the first Shetland Wool Week 10 years ago, and he's been working in the Shetland wool industry for 50 years now.
Yeah.
So I thought it is saying something that Prince Charles was able to impress Oliver Henry with his knowledge. I think it does show the depth of Prince Charles's commitment and interest in the wool industry.
Yeah. That was interesting and surprising. I really enjoyed his speech, actually.
Yep.
So now you're probably wondering how our own knitting projects are coming along, and we're up to under construction now. Well, unfortunately, neither Andrew or I managed to knit a single stitch while we were away. Yeah. So we've got pitifully little progress to show you on our projects this episode. But here's mine, and I showed you this project first in the last episode because it's my brand new project, and it's a design by the Danish designer Crystal Seyfarth, and it's called Morning Star Bridal Jacket. Here it is here. And here's a picture of it for those of you who've never seen it before. And it's based on a traditional Danish costume, or more particularly a traditional bridal jacket that's worn on the island of Fanø in Denmark. And I'm using Crystal Seyfarth's own lamb's wool yarn. Here it is here. And the design comes from her book, Fanø Strik, Beyond the Horizon. And there it is on the front cover. Looking very gorgeous and glamorous. So here it is. This is what I've done. And it starts with this peplum, which is like a skirt of material that's attached to the waistline. And that's knitted in the flat. And after you've done that, you've got 3 pin tucks, and they're done in the 3 colours of the design. The design's only got 3 colours. And then you get straight into the stranded colour work, and you join it into the round, and you start knitting in the round for the bodice. And there's steek stitches up the front because it is a jacket and it's going to be opened there. It's looking very medieval, I think. Don't you?
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be an unusual design. It's an unusual design to knit, but also to wear.
Sure.
So it does have waist shaping. So these pins tucks here sit directly in your waist. So that's going to be the smallest part. And then it just is gradually increased up to the bust. And that's the challenging part of the design, is putting in waist shaping without disturbing the overall pattern on the bodice. So if I wasn't going to put in any waist shaping at all, the pattern would actually flow continuously and unbrokenly from the right front around the back to the left front, and it would just all be quite perfect. But I have to put increases in, so I'm going to do them on the sides, both sides where side seams would normally be. And that's the challenge. So I'm putting in a single column of pivot stitches, and this is a technique that I first read about in Meg Swanson and Amy Detchen's book, Knitting with Two Colours. So I'll show you how I've done that. Here's a picture of my knitting. So you'll see here the area where I'm putting in my increases, and you can do lots of variations on this pivot stitch technique. In my case, I've taken a single column of stitches where each side seam would normally be, and I've kept them in the background colour, which is light blue, and then I've increased on either side of that central column of stitches. So that means that the patterning on each side of that column of stitches, or that area of stitches which is going to gradually increase, won't crash directly into each other as I'm adding in extra stitches. And this column of pivot stitches makes just like a neat line or area so that the pattern can be evenly mirrored on both sides. Now, my pattern is very simple, it's very open and big. If you've got a particularly busy pattern, you can also have, say, 3 columns of stitches forming that break. So the outside 2 columns could be in the pattern colour, and the central middle column could be in the background colour. And that break is just a nice even area so that the side front and the side back patterning will be mirrored evenly on either side of that panel. So you'll get to see what I mean more as I progress with more increases, but hopefully I'll have the whole bodice completed by next episode.
Yep.
Your turn.
So this is the progress that I've made since the last episode. Oh, let's hold it that way. I don't think it's pitiful, but it's not a whole lot to show. I did want to recount one incident that occurred. It is just simple stocking stitch, and I thought I was doing really well. But Andrea did point out that I had a couple of loose stitches, or in her terminology, sloppy stitches. She did first suggest that we simply rip back the progress that I'd achieved over the last 2 weeks. I think she might have seen my face and shown mercy on me and said, all right, I'll work that out. So what she's done is essentially taken the extra yarn in my sloppy stitches from somewhere around here and worked it to the side of the piece of material here, and that's what results in this little loop here. And the plan is that this gets stitched up into the seam, and that disappears there, and the material here is all perfect, so it's all good as new. Another advantage, I'm told, of knitting garments in pieces and then seaming.
I think knitting garments in pieces is really useful, particularly for beginning knitters, because you're only ever working with a small piece, and you're only ever working with increases or decreases on a small section of knitting, so you're not having to do a whole multitude of things at the same time. Yeah. It's very portable, and you achieve a sleeve in a piece, and it's like you've finished a whole project in itself.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. So coming up now is some extraordinary lace knitting that you are going to love watching. Last year, we interviewed the expert lace knitting Shetland sisters Anne Janssen and Kathleen Anderson. And this year in Shetland, Andrew and I dropped in to visit Kathleen Anderson and her husband Geordie, which was really lovely. And while we were there visiting, Kathleen started to tell us about her grandniece who had just won the champion prize at the Vaux show for her great lace knitting. And Andrew spontaneously said, oh, it'd be good to have her on as a knitter of the world. And within 5 minutes, literally, Lauren had been tracked down and I was talking to her on the telephone, and we only had one free morning left that we could even film the thing on, but Lauren was very keen and organised, and she was able to go and pick up her prize-winning shawls and organise the content of what she was going to say and rehearse and practice it a bit. And so we were able to do it, and yeah, that all happened very spontaneously.
Yeah.
But we were really impressed. She's just a lovely, lovely girl. She's our daughter's age, Madeline. And she was just very conscientious and motivated, so she was a total joy to work with.
Yeah, she was really busy at the time, so that was impressive. In this segment, Laura mentions a couple of things. She says that she was waiting in the galley hall. She was waiting for her father in the galley hall. And she also says that her father was the Jarl. These are both references to the Shetland festival called Up Heliar, which is a really major event in the Shetland calendar. Over the winter months across Shetland, the Up Heliar squads, they actually build replicas of wooden Viking longboats, and they also create their own Viking armour, and you see this around the place. And then towards the end of January, the actual night of the festival, there's a huge torch parade, and that means they're walking through the streets, thousands of them, with these burning torches. And at the end of the parade,
those torches are actually...
They're real torches.
Yeah, real fire,
not batteries.
Not batteries.
So they throw these torches into these beautiful boats that they've built and watch them burn. And this is done at the end of January, and it marks the end of the Yule season, or the Christmas season. So Lauren's saying that she was waiting in the galley hall, which is the hall where her father was helping to build this wooden boat. And her father was the Jarl, which means that he was the head of the squad for their region, for the Up Heliar squad in their region for that year, which is a really cool position to have.
Yeah, it is. Apparently you don't get it unless you've been in a committee for at least 15 years.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Hello, my name is Lauren Anderson. I'm 21 years old and I've lived in Shetland all my life, and I'm going to tell you a bit about my knitting. So I first started knitting when I was in primary 2, and I knitted right through primary school, and I knitted various little stuffed animals and toys and things. It was probably one of my most favourite things to go to school and do. I was always excited on knitting day. But unfortunately, when I went to secondary, I sort of lost interest and didn't pick it up again until I was 14, when my dad was going to be the Jarl for the Delta Up Heliar. And we were spending a lot of nights in the freezing cold galley shed, and I was getting fed up, so I asked my granny to teach me how to knit lace. And she was very excited and very keen to pass on all her knowledge and skills. So I started off by knitting various little swatches of different patterns and was picking out all the ones I really liked. And then I went on to knit my first garment. I come from a long line of lace knitters. My great granny was very well known for her lace knitting, and it got passed on to my granny and her 3 sisters, and they're all very well known in Shetland. They're expert knitters, so I really want to learn all their skills and their knowledge. So the first thing I knitted was a bird's eye scarf. I first started doing a pattern that was a lot simpler than the bird's eye, but for some reason I couldn't get my head around it, and it was a pattern every second row, so knit in between, but I could not figure it out. So I said to my granny I was struggling a bit, and so she gave me the heirloom knitting book and told me to pick out a pattern that I liked, and the one I went for was the bird's eye. And at first she looked at me as if I was a bit crazy, because it's a quite complicated pattern. It's pattern every row, but she said that we'd give it a go anyway, and I seemed to pick it up no bother at all. I managed to get it finished in time for the Vaux show, and I entered it and won 3 prizes for it, one of which was the overall non-livestock champion. In between this and my other lace project that I will tell you about in a bit, I knitted this lace spencer. I decided to knit this because I wanted to try something different with lace in different yarn and see how the patterns worked and how the overall finished look was going to be. And this was actually a pattern that my Auntie Anne had knitted previously, and they thought it would be a good one for me to try out. And I also entered this into the Vaux show and won a first with it. After I'd won all the prizes at the Vaux show for my lace scarf, I was really keen to expand on and improve my skills. So I asked my granny if she would show me how to knit a shawl. And she was very keen on the idea and was very excited to pass on more of her skills. So we very quickly began to knit little swatches that were going to be going into the whole shawl. I started with that, and then once I'd done all the swatches, I began knitting the edging for the shawl, and I knitted and knitted until I got enough scallops to be able to pick up the stitches for my first quarter. And then I would have knitted going inwards, and once I'd finished that, then I would go on to knit the 3 other quarters. And on the last quarter, I would have knitted until I got to here, and I would have made a holy row, and then knitted a few more plain rows, and then went on to knit the centre. The centre and the edging are the same pattern, they're the print and the wave, and it's probably one of my favourite patterns that I've knitted in lace so far. I think it really flows nicely and it goes really well as a centre pattern. The pattern in the quarter that I used was mainly the Tree of Life with a few other little motifs that were making up filler stitches to kind of make the trees stand out very well. I managed to get this one finished in about a year, and it got finished in time to be entered into the Vauxhall again. And there I won the prize as the reserved non-livestock champion for it, and a few other trophies as well. So I didn't talk before about this, but I do knit with a knitting belt. My granny showed me right from the start how to use this because she uses one, and now I wouldn't really know how to knit without one unless I'm using circular knitting needles. And then finally, this is the last piece I'm going to show you today. This is the last shawl that I knitted. I just finished it in August, beginning of August. So the construction of this was much the same as the previous one. Again, starting with the edge and picking up the stitches for the quarters, and then onto that knitting the centre. But for this one I used different patterns. They were maybe slightly more complicated. And so the centre and again the edging was the Alice Maud pattern. It's quite a traditional Shetland lace one, and I would say probably most Shetland lace knitters would know exactly what this pattern was. And the the quarter was actually designed by my auntie Anne Junsen. So I was really excited actually and quite keen to knit this one and to put it into one of my shawls because it was her that designed it. It made it feel a bit more special to me. And I also think that it flows really well with the centre. So if you look following this line, it goes right into the middle of these diamond patterns, and it does that again here. And then if you look on this side of the shawl, then these lines here match, and it sort of makes another diamond pattern. So it actually really flows nicely, and we didn't actually realise this until we'd washed and stretched it, and I took some photos of it and we were just examining the photos, and we realised that it all sort of lined up really, really nicely. So I was quite happy to see it all finished and how it actually flowed together. So again, I entered this one into the Vauxhall and I won a few prizes and trophies for it. One of them was this one, which was actually a memorial cup for my great granny. So I was very proud to win this, and I think that she would be really proud that I'm doing this and carrying on her lace tradition. Another one that I won was this one. This is the overall non-livestock champion. And again, I was really happy to win this. This is sort of the main prize for arts and crafts at the Vauxhall. So it's good to see that my work has been recognised as something amazing. And my granny has also won this one as well. So I just wanted to say that I'm not just been knitting lace shawls and really fine lace stuff. I actually recently picked up a pattern of Ella Gordon's. So it's the Vatslin jumper, and I've really enjoyed knitting it. It's been quite plain, so it's a good thing to kind of pick up in between different things that I've been doing. And the reason I picked it was because of the lace pattern at the bottom. So I'm not gotten out of lace just that fast. I really hope that me doing all this is able to inspire other young people kind of my age and younger to be picking up lace traditions like this. And I think it's really important skills to have, and I don't want to see the tradition lost in Shetland. Thank you for watching, and I've really enjoyed sharing all of my lace projects with you, and I hope you like them too.
Wasn't that the most exquisitely fine and beautiful lace? Just very beautifully and evenly knitted. It was great. Mm-hmm. When Lauren mentioned this book, which is the Heirloom Lace Knitting Shetland Lace Pattern and Workbook by Sharon Miller, I thought it looked really, really great. So I bought a copy. In fact, it's the only thing that I bought that's knitting related when we were in Shetland. But it looks very, very detailed, and it seems to have a lot of the traditional Shetland patterns that I've seen and have heard about in here, and with a ton of great advice on how to structure them all together. And one day I would really love to do a traditional shawl like that and arrange my own set of patternings, not my own made up ones, but a set of patternings from this book. Standard. Standard patternings. Yep. On the border and the edging and the middle. It just looks stunning.
Yep. I like the structure. I was also particularly taken with the bird's eye lace scarf, which Lauren had done. And I mentioned this to Andrea, and Andrea seems to think it's the next thing on my next project on my apprenticeship.
I was suggesting that he started another project, and then he said out of the blue, well, actually, I would really like to knit the bird's eye scarf that Lauren did. And my jaw just completely dropped, and I thought, wow, I'm holding you to this. Yeah. You're not getting out of this one. You do realise that the bird's eye pattern is patterning on both sides. You don't have like an extra knit row or purl row in between.
I know. And I wasn't necessarily talking about doing this as my next project, but you seem to have taken it on. I'm not absolutely convinced of the wisdom of this, given that my stocking stitch has just failed the quality control review.
Yeah.
But we'll see. But Lauren,
it'll be interesting to watch.
Lauren is a naturally crafty person.
She is. And she does, apart from her gorgeous lace knitting, she does lots of little paintings and things like that. And this is some sea glass that she's just picked up, and she's hand-painted little flowers on them. And I think they're just gorgeous. So I bought a couple of these to give as a gift to our daughter Madeline, because poor Madeline really wanted to come to Shetland with us, but she very dutifully stayed home and looked after Jack.
My name's Wendy and I make teddy bears.
We've had a few animals on this show, sheep obviously, but also yak, goats, a few cows, the odd alpaca, dogs. I'm really pleased that we can finally feature the bear, because I think bears play an important role in our lives. Wendy, you're an expert on bears. You've been making bears for 22 years now. Why do bears have such a universal appeal?
I think bears are a really comforting thing. It's a reminder of childhood. So for a lot of people, they had a bear as a child and they've still got it when they've grown up. So it just means so much. I think it just means so much to everyone. No matter what age you are, you can always have a bear.
Yeah. And tell us about the materials that you're using here.
Yeah, so when we first started, we used to buy woolen waste from our knitwear factories and also use old sweaters. So scraps like this that came from Jameson spinning, pieces that weren't quite good enough for sweaters.
Yeah.
So we would recycle these.
Okay, so this piece has actually got a hole in it.
Yeah, it's
so
got a hole in it there, but we can cut round the holes. We don't need, any condition really can do.
Yep.
With the Fair Isle fabric, of course, you have, what we do with it is we felt it slightly. So that means that we put it in the washing machine and shrink it. And you can see this one is quite stretchy and it unravels very easily. So that's not been washed. That's straight off the knitting machine.
Yep.
If you look at this one, which has been washed about 40 degrees, that's a lot more sturdy. It's a more solid fabric, and it means that you can cut it in any direction. It doesn't unravel. It mats together. You have a felt, and it means you can cut and sew, and you have a great fabric to work with. You can stretch it, and it's not going to go anywhere.
Okay.
The other thing that we have is the Fair Isle fabrics that we get knitted up now. So these are knitted up at the local textile college using Jameson's yarn, and we have a wide range of different designs of fabric, this being one of my favourites. So traditional Fair Isle in traditional colours. It's a beautiful fabric based on an old sweater. So this means we always have a constant supply of fabric available to make the bears.
Yeah, okay. And your daughter also does some designs for you.
Yeah, she does some designs. So one of the more recent ones that she did was our Viking bear. So you can see from the fabric, it's got the Viking faces obviously along the front. As a finished bear, it has the Vikings on the front of the chest and the upper arms. Mm-hmm. So a very traditional Shetland bear.
That's beautiful.
The other thing that we do is lace bear. So you can see from the selection we have here, the lace bear is made using the traditional knitted Shetland lace. So originally the bear was made from a small cardigan. That's the sleeve that was left. Mm-hmm. But of course, because there was only one sleeve, I needed to find more fabric. So the college that knits the Fair Isle can also knit Shetland lace for us. So we just have it on the roll like this. It's a beautiful fabric. It's knitted on the machine. It's washed on a light wool wash, and then we press it with a hot steam iron, keep it on the roll, and that means that we always have a constant supply. With the lace, you'll see there's a coloured lining in behind this one, and the lining does two things. It obviously shows off the lace to its best effect, but the lining, by sewing a lining on the back, which is just a plain knit sweater, means that you keep the stuffing inside. And the stuffing is all the woolen scraps. Yeah. So we recycle all the woolen waste from what we have here in the workshop and also what we get from the knitwear factories. Yeah. So we try not to waste anything, reuse everything as much as possible.
Yeah. They're very individual, and I do understand you have individual names for every bear.
Yeah, that's right, yes. When we first started, the very first few bears didn't have names. I didn't plan this as a business, so I wasn't thinking ahead. Yeah. But we started to give them names, so each individual bear goes out with a name tag, which is tied around his neck. Mm-hmm. We give them a Christian name and a place name, and the place name always ties them back to Shetland. So wherever they go to live in the world, they've always got their connection to home. Yeah. And our customers like to get in touch to let us know where they've gone, which is really sweet.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so can you take us through the steps in the construction of the bears?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So once the fabric's been felted, we lay it out here on the board, we pin it on, as I'm doing just now. Then it's cut with just a standard pair of scissors, just like this, and that's it ready for the sewing machine. So the next stage is the sewing machine. So we pin the pieces together and then we just sew them on the sewing machine with a straight stitch. You don't need any special stitch because the fabric has been felted already. It's not going to unravel, so it actually works really well. the main thing we try to do is to match the pattern all the way around. You can match it quite easily on the back of the fabric because you can see the pattern here, the lines, so it's quite easy to match. And it's just the normal polyester thread that I use. We don't use any stretch thread. It seems to work fine with the wool, although the wool will stretch more. So once we've finished sewing on the sewing machine, the next stage should be stuffing the teddy bear. We, as I said before, use all the woolen scraps that's left over. These are all cut by hand into small pieces to use as stuffing. And you can really put quite a lot in here. You can pack it away quite well, and it means that you get a nice shape to the bear. You can move it and mould it and shape it a bit like Play-Doh. So over the years, the bear will keep its shape and it won't settle. Because there's so much wool inside, the stuffing doesn't really settle. So it's a great stuffing, it really is. If anybody uses this or has any scraps left over when you're knitting, any of the yarn, waste yarn, don't throw it away because it makes great toy stuffing. So once the head has been stuffed, we have one here that we did earlier, and that's how it looks once it's been finished. It's just to get his smile and then he's all done.
So you are a Shetlander, but still, how did you get the idea of making bears out of Shetland fair isle fabric?
Well, it's not something I ever planned to do as a business, that's for sure. The first 2 bears I made as a gift for my sister, I didn't even have a name for the business at the time. But living in Burgh, where I do, in Burgh Island, Shetland, Burgh bears seemed the obvious choice. Yep. So these are the very first 2 Burgh bears that we ever made. They were made as an anniversary gift for my sister from a sweater that our mum had knitted, and someone had shrunk by accident because Shetland wool shrinks very easily. Now, I never planned to make any more. These were going to be the only 2, but a friend saw them and asked if she could have one, and the rest is history, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay, and you had seen on TV somebody doing something not the same?
Yeah. So the programme I'd seen that gave me a rough idea was they'd taken an Aran sweater and they cut it into a square, made a cushion cover. So to me, that seemed like a great idea to reuse something. And teddy bears, as I said before, everybody loves a teddy bear. So by taking a sweater that meant a lot to both me and my sister, making it into teddy bears, I thought that was a great idea.
Okay, and that's actually something that you've continued in the business. You do still take other people's garments?
Yeah, we do. So folk come with sweaters that have a lot of meaning to them. So similar to the ones we have here, traditional knitwear that otherwise would maybe be kept for sentimental reasons, but it goes in a drawer or it goes on the loft, it gets forgotten about. Yep. So memory bears are a big thing. We like doing that, and it's the bear has a story before he's even been made because you've got that sentimental value attached to it. Yeah. Which is, to me, is very special. Yeah.
Okay, and the other option that you have is that the knitters actually, or if they are a knitter, they can knit up a swatch or a piece of material to your specification.
Yes. So with the resurgence in knitting, huge interest in it now, there's more and more people getting into it. So to have a totally unique bear made from your own personal choice of colours or patterns, we can give you instructions on how to knit the swatch, the size we need. We can make it into a bear, and then it's yours forever.
I particularly love the idea of taking an old but maybe still beloved sweater and giving it a new life as a beautiful cuddly teddy bear.
Yeah.
Can you maybe tell us one of your more special commissions that you've ever done?
Oh, okay. Well, we've done quite a lot, but because people like to get back in touch to tell us about their bears, there was one story. A lady had bears made for her family, and it was made from her granddad's sweater. Now, she had about 4 or 5, I think it was 5 made, and she got one for her granny. And her granny, it was obviously still quite soon after, so it was quite an emotional time. So she gave it to her granny for Christmas, and then her granny told her after that the bear was sitting with his head on the side. And she said, "Oh, well, if you're not happy with that, Wendy can fix it." And she said, "No, that's how your granddad used to sit." So to me, that just, it was such a lovely story. It was very heartwarming.
That is very
So it makes
sweet.
my job worthwhile.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Absolutely.
All right, well, it's been wonderful meeting you and your bears.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on Fruity Knitting.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you too.
Welcome back. Thank you very much to all of our wonderful patrons for supporting the production of this show. It really is because of you that this content can be produced, and for that we are extremely grateful. So thank you. We do want to encourage more of our viewers to become patrons because we do try to work as efficiently and frugally as possible, but there still are lots of expenses that are involved in producing this content, and it is now a full-time job for both Andrew and myself. So if you are viewing these episodes, please do become a patron. You can do so for a small amount every month. Thank you very much. So coming up now is a very chatty and friendly interview with Hazel Tyndall. Hazel is a well-known Shetland knitter, designer and teacher, and she's produced 2 very good video series. One of them is called 50 Tips from Shetland Knitters, and it's produced in collaboration with the expert spinner and lace knitter Elizabeth Johnston, who was last year's patron of the Wool Week, and we interviewed Elizabeth back in episode 40. And this video series is a response to all of the questions that they both have received over the many years that they've been giving classes and workshops, and there's a tremendous amount of brilliant information in it. The other video series is The Art of Fair Isle Knitting, and here Hazel takes you step by step through knitting a seamless Fair Isle cardigan, including instructions on steeking and finishing techniques. And Hazel has kindly offered Fruity Knitting patrons a 20% discount on both of these video series, which we think is a really great offer.
Before we jump into the interview with Hazel Tyndall, which is going to be great, I wanted to give you just a very small behind-the-scenes story. You will see in this interview, we've got shots of Hazel's work on the table, so shots from above, and that's done with this camera here, which is what we call camera 2, and I'm the operator of camera 2.
That's camera 1.
That's camera 1 that you're seeing through right now. This is camera 2. And so the technique is I stand on a chair beside the table, so kind of above the guest, and I hold my arm out because I'm not meant to be in the picture, and I hold my arm out kind of like that above the work. And I do this for as long as I can stand it, and I try to get the pictures that I imagine Andrea wants me to get. And my concern while I was doing this was that I don't drop this camera, which is not overly heavy, but it's certainly not light, and it would make an impact if it landed on somebody's head. So I try not to drop it, and I'm holding it out like this for quite a period of time. At some point, I have to carefully change arms like this, with trying not to get in the shot, and you will see that I fail at doing this a couple of times. So I do make a couple of sneak appearances. Are they cameo appearances?
I don't know.
Something like that. Anyway, on top of that, so I'm concentrating on not dropping the camera. After the interview, Andrea looked at the footage, and I actually almost lost my job because it did turn out that in my nervousness, I focused the camera probably more often than I need to.
And he chose all the interesting parts to refocus or wobble the camera. So every time Hazel's talking about something really good, it's like this. So I'm going crazy during editing.
Yeah, so
He's on probation now.
Been given a firm warning and been told I'm still on probation.
We hope you enjoy it despite that. And thanks for spending time with us. It's been great to see you again, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Yep, bye.
Bye. Welcome to Fruity Knitting. I'm so happy to be catching up with Hazel Tyndall again. For those of you who don't know Hazel, she is a very well-known Shetland knitter, designer and teacher, and like many Shetland knitters of her generation, she learnt to knit before she could read and write. And Hazel has a wealth of experience when it comes to knitting, and together with Elizabeth Johnson, who's another expert Shetland knitter and spinner, She has made a must-have video class called 50 Tips from Shetland Knitters, and this class allows the knitter to watch in great detail all of the Shetland knitting techniques and tricks and tips that have been passed down for generations here. And I think probably some of those tricks and tips will come out in today's conversation.
Absolutely.
We are always so appreciative when you agree to come on Fruity Knitting, so thank you very much.
It's always nice to see you.
Good. So, Hazel, one of the classes that you regularly teach during festivals is on how to construct a fair old yoke. And recently you did a blog post where you compared the results of knitting a yoke bottom up to top down. And you did some experiments which I'd really love you to talk about, and then tell us what conclusions you came to.
Well, I haven't actually knitted a whole yoke top down, but what I did was I took 2 of my mother's old ones, that's this 2, and decided I would knit them top down. So this was the first one. So I started here. I studied this to see exactly how should decreased here so that I could increase at the same rate. So the decreases here are at the side of the tree, and then there's some more here and some more here. So I replicated it, and so I was making the increases here at the side of the tree, and that worked fine, except I nearly forgot to stop increasing because you get into the swing of it. So the increases are made in alternate rows, so it's a smooth increase, and this one worked fine. This one is different because there's not a lot of decreasing happening here, but there's a lot of decreases here. And here and here. So I did this one top down, increasing at the same rate. And I think it's this row in particular because you're making 7 stitches from 5. So it means that your 5 stitches are put under a lot of strain to make that extra new stitches. And when this one was newly finished, it was kind of bumpy.
Yeah.
And it didn't lie so flat, but this has been in a box for quite a while and it's flattened out.
Good flattening.
So perhaps it would work okay. But what the one thing that I did think this showed very well is the curve that the increasing or decreasing makes, so that if you had to add short rows, as I see happening in places, I've seen people wearing really bumpy top-down yokes, and it's because they've done short rows before the yoke has started.
Okay.
And then if your short rows aren't matching exactly this curve, then you're going to get spare fabric. So my conclusion was that top-down don't need short rows.
Yeah.
Now the way in Shetland that we get a lower neck and a higher neck is that we do extra rows on the back before we start the yoke. So this is a piece of an old jumper, and this from here to here is actually a straight line. This is a straight row.
Yes.
And as is this, so it's the decreases that have given it the curve.
Traditionally in Shetland, it's always knitted bottom up, is that right?
Yeah.
And you don't actually use short rows, do you?
No, there's no really a tradition for short rows in Shetland, though I did use them in a skirt I knitted about 30 years ago, but I would never have known to call them short rows.
So basically what happened, because a lot of the bodies were knitted on machines, did they just knit the back higher anyway, and then that gave you that tilt of the back higher? Okay.
Yeah, it means it's a bit trickier when you come to insert the sleeves because you have to line up the underarm shaping with the underarm of the garment, so you need fewer sleeve stitches at the front than you do at the back.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the right way around. So you have to stop and you have to have a right sleeve and a left sleeve as you're joining it.
I see, yeah.
But for us, the machinists did it all, and we just picked up the stitches that the machinist left for us.
Yeah, okay. So you would say on a traditional tree pattern like this, you found that the increases worked and still lay flat,
Yeah.
but on a pattern where you've actually got to do a lot of, well, normally bottom up would be a lot of decreases in one row. You found that the increases put too much strain.
And I think
And made it-
they've sort of tightened up this row because a lot of increases, and it's a lot easier to decrease than increase.
Yeah. So your verdict is bottom up is still your favourite.
Well, I think stitches and colour need to go like this, shouting hooray.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's interesting. And another thing is typically the traditional Shetland yoke was quite, it wasn't very deep, was it? It's quite shallow yoke, just sitting up the top. Is that right?
Yeah, my mother sort of had a ready reckoner for how many rows you would have in a yoke according to the body size. But it could be as few or as many as you want. And then, of course, if you want a wider neck, you just do less decreases up here. So you could decrease a lot less and you would get a lot wider neck.
Now, your latest cardigan that you've knitted is also a yoke construction, and you designed it specifically to go with a particular pair of trousers that are very colourful. So, and I know that your fans really love seeing how you work with colour. So I thought maybe you could just talk us through how you put the cardigan together. Yeah.
So these are the very bright trousers, or pants I think they call them in America, I bought. And I thought, I need maybe something nice to wear with it. And I just happened to have this dark colour, this one. I had a load of this yarn in double knitting at home anyway, so that meant I could get started. And then I just picked out all the colours that I could find and sat down with the Jamieson shade card so that I could go into the shop and just say, I need this, this and this. So these are the colours. As I say, this was one I happened to have at home. So the body is knitted in double knitting yarn because it grows faster. And then I changed to spindrift for the yoke. And these are the colours that I bought to go in it. So you can see that hopefully you can see it, they're all here somewhere. These are not colours that I like much. So you can see there's a minimum.
Yeah. Just as a tiny contrast here. Just a question, the body is in double knit, and then you went down to fingering weight. So you must have increased stitches.
I had to increase the stitch numbers.
Down here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you look at colours, so as you see, I didn't use much of this one, but this one, it comes in at the start of the pattern, and then I went to this one, I think. So it's gradually getting lighter till I get to white across the middle. And then at the same time as the pattern's getting lighter, the background is getting lighter. So I've missed one here. But
it's a darker shade of aqua, if we can imagine.
Yeah, it works best if you have your darkest dark with your darkest light.
Okay.
And your lightest. So if I wanted to use all these colours, I would line them up and say, this is probably the dark colours. So they're going from darkest to lightest. And here I have darkest to lightest. This is kind of arguable.
Yeah.
They're similar. Yeah. So if you have this much contrast, you're always going to see the shape that you're knitting.
Okay, so that goes well against that, and there and there and here.
But one of the things I don't often do is change both pattern and background at the same time. I like to have a row between, and then it's a smoother transition.
Yeah.
A row or two, yeah.
It's always like painting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just like smudging the edges.
Yeah, it does, yes. That describes it well. And to recap on how we get the shaping, you can see here, this is the armhole here, so this is the back, and that'll be 4 or 5 inches maybe. We used to measure in knuckles.
Really?
Yeah. And here at the front, so this is the armhole stitches here, and it's really just about 1 inch.
Yeah, how many knuckles?
And not a knuckle.
Two knuckles from
Well,
here.
I think a knuckle was from here to here, and that's about 4 inches.
Okay.
Here to here.
Okay.
So you would, if you didn't have a tape measure, you would measure in
Cool.
knuckles.
So not just from one
No.
joint to the other, just the whole
No.
thing.
So, and
Good to
this
know.
also shows this is actually a straight row here, but you can see how the shaping has given it this curve. So there's no short rows before I start at the yoke.
Yeah.
So this is a straight row here. The shaping within here is enough to do.
It is, and look at the difference here.
Yeah, and that's all come about because of the gap here. That's so much bigger than that, and yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, now for a few years running, Hazel held the title of the world's fastest knitter. And the tools that we use to knit with not only affects our speed, but also the final fabric of our knitting and also whether we've experienced discomfort whilst knitting. Now, Hazel, you knit in the traditional Shetland way, which is using a knitting belt, but you have experimented with circular needles and you don't like them.
Well, I knew I didn't like them before I did the experiment.
You just tried again.
It was confirmation.
So I thought it would be great for the audience. I think they would really appreciate it if you could demonstrate exactly how you use your Shetland belt and just describe things like how you tension the yarn over your fingers, and you've also got tension on your actual knitted fabric, and what each of your fingers on both hands are actually doing. And then perhaps after the demonstration, just share with us your thoughts about why you dislike circular needles.
Okay. So this is my knitting belt, which is probably about 50 years old, so it's well worn in, and I use that for the right knitting needle. Now this is a long piece of knitting that's got long enough that I no longer really need this string, which I put in. This is called a ripping string, and this went in when it was very small and got wrapped round the belt. But now that it's longer, I can put it behind my back. And when you get it like this, you put in a bit of tension on here, so the stitches get longer as opposed to sticking to the needle. And I always push the stitches into my palm so that they're all ready to come off. On here, I just have the yarn round that finger and over this one. I never have it like this, because if you go like this, your finger has further to travel to get to the needle.
Yeah.
So it's always this way. This little marker here tells me that I need to check, is this a row that's going to have holes put in or not? And I've got this organised so that there's no holes. So when I'm knitting, this finger on my left hand is pushing the stitch to the edge, to the narrow bit of the needle, and this one just makes the stitch, and the right thumb is catching the new one. This thumb is feeding the stitches along to the finger.
So they're very minimal movements.
Yeah, not a lot of movement.
So these two are just constantly pushing up stitches.
Yeah.
And you've actually got tension between the stitch you've just made where your thumb's holding it.
Yeah, I guess.
And that. And
yeah, there's a fair bit of tension there. Now I'm told that to get, and I know it's true, to get good looking garter stitch, you should pull every stitch tight as you knit it. And I got that tip from Kathleen Anderson, but that takes longer, and I find I lift the thumb up to tighten it.
Yeah, okay.
But it really makes a difference, because I had something, I started doing that, pulling every stitch tight, and then I got fed up of that and just made the odd, without pulling them tight, I had to rip it back because the difference was quite marked.
Okay. Kathleen Anderson, we've interviewed before last year. She's a well-known lace knitter, Shetland lace knitter. So she would be doing a fair bit of garter stitch too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she does a lot of garter stitch. So do you want me to?
Yes, now show us a little bit of speed.
And the reason that I don't much like circulars is that when I get the stitches bunched up like this, then I should be able to do about 50 without having to move anything, because at the moment they're gathering in my right hand, and the right hand can hold quite a lot before I have to start moving things, and it's beginning to get hot. See, I had to move there just to give the new one space, and that's something I have to do much more often on a circular needle, I find.
So that's what this finger does. This thumb actually is holding the gathered stitches on the right needle back away from the edge.
And I suppose this finger too is playing its part. It's helping
pulling it back.
But you can see that they're bunching up there.
Yeah.
But I should be able, I think, to finish the row maybe without moving anything, but they're getting a bit tight. And at the same time, these fingers are helping to get them to the tip of this needle.
Okay, so it's all about conserving movements that are big movements, so having to stop and then rebunch stitches on the left and spread them out on the right.
Yeah.
And you're saying that you don't have to do that as often on the
No, I mean I've got quite a lot bunched up there.
Yeah.
And on a circular I wouldn't get the same number.
Okay.
So will I try a circular to show you the difference?
You're still looking pretty fast, Hazel.
Well, these are actually quite nice tips.
You're still looking pretty fast, but I can imagine, like what you said, you've got to actually move it down.
Yeah.
And you can't rest.
No, you can't
this
really
hand.
rest anything, and I think you tend to curl up a bit more with a circular. So I've managed that much, and I've had to spread it.
Yes, but I can see that you've also actually got to hold that needle because it's not held by the belt.
Yeah, I have to hold the needle, and this is feeling a bit full now, so I'm going to have to spread them out, and I think that's probably fewer than I had before, so I'm going to have to move them along. And once it gets bigger, then holding it on your arm takes the weight off this left hand, but I think a lot of people knit with circulars with everything in their lap, which gets a bit heavy. But all the knitters that I watched as I was growing up would sit bolt upright, and they usually sat half on the seat.
Okay.
So that the long needles would be pointing out this way, and they were always dead straight back so that they would knit faster.
You hear from the terrible knitters of Dent, I don't know if you've heard about that, but they had a swaying movement.
They said they swayed, but
was that forward and back or side to side?
I don't know how they did it.
That's quite fascinating.
Yeah,
I would love
to
know.
It would be lovely to have seen it.
Yeah. Every year, Jamieson's and Smith have a competition which they call Colour Box, and they select 8 shades of their 2-ply jumper weight, and participants have to use at least 5 of those 8 shades in their creations. And sometimes these 8 shades are quite challenging to put together, which actually makes it more exciting because then it's more interesting to see what the contestants have come up with. And Hazel, you've done a few variations on this year's colours, so I thought just talk about how you put them together and how you developed and played with the colours.
Well, I started by lining them up into what I thought was the dark colours and the light colours. These could go either way around. This is a difficult colour because it's neither dark nor light, but it can be used both as a background colour and a pattern colour, as I did in this little bit. So here I've used all 8 colours, and the background goes from this to this to this to this and this, and then the pattern colour. So I'm using my lightest dark with my lightest light. So this goes from this to this to this, and then this one becomes a pattern colour here to go with that. But they're not easy colours to use. And I did a few little things, these things, to try them out before I could get a garment. And couldn't find the way to make them work to make a whole jumper this time. So I just made, I think these work well.
Yeah.
But I think this is too bright.
Okay.
But I like this little bit.
So you've been playing around sort of like different swatches. This is the tea cozy, isn't it?
Yeah. And this is another tea cozy.
A nice bright
So
crown.
they're quite bright.
Yeah, I like what you've done with here, with the blue.
Yes, yeah. It's okay. You can still see the shape. I think this is one where I didn't have a chart and I sort of got it wrong and had to improvise the star, but it's fine.
Okay. And you've got a Dorset button here, which looks great.
Yes.
That really makes the brim look pretty, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sort of lifts a plain bit.
And here you've got a sort of a vest, which has got really interesting shaping. So what happened here? How have you constructed this?
Well, I started actually with the back. There's a circle on the back, which was half a cushion cover, and it had been washed and flattened and lying waiting for side 2. And I thought, I wonder if I could get it into a garment.
So there's the cushion there that you used.
Yeah. So I started here and knitted up the front and the back together, and then I used short rows to give some shaping here and here. And then at the front, I knew I wanted a V-neck, so I did decreases along here. Then it goes up straight, and then I had to do another little wedgy shape
here.
Yeah, for the shoulder top. And then I picked up, this is a nice way if you haven't done your tension swatch on this bit, because then you can figure it out.
Fix it up here.
Yeah, you can fix it here. So I picked up stitches along all this edge, and I actually went around the back neck.
Okay.
So it went right round, but it was it was too much when I was finished, so I had to cut it off. And then...
so you knitted that like a complete long circle, in a sense, with a stick.
Mm-hmm. So it goes from here to here, and then the button bands afterwards.
Okay. And then so you cut it here.
I had to cut it there because...
And tacked it down.
There was surplus fair there. So yeah.
But that's actually ended up a nice shaping, hasn't it?
It worked well, yeah. It worked somehow.
And you've done it again.
Yeah, I took notes, so I thought I should have a go again and see if I could maybe one day write the pattern.
So this time you started with the front, didn't you?
I started with the body, yeah. So I knitted the body and did the shaping here, and I had to do shaping bearing in mind that I left live stitches, so I used short rows and left the stitches live. Okay. And for this bit, there was a provisional cast on when I came to do the circle. And the sleeves, I knitted up the way. This one has sleeves because it's more useful than sleeveless. And so the circle was the last thing I did.
Okay, so the first time it was the circle that you were trying to make into a jumper.
Yeah, and I think that had to be done because it had to be the full size, whereas when I finished this, it was just looked a mess till it went on a jumper board. So I think it works okay. It's a bit bright, but I'm not going to see it.
It's striking actually to have that on your back. It's a target.
Yeah, well I wore the brown one. And people were surprised at what was on my back.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I just want to try this lovely little hat on with the Dorset button here. It's been so much fun to talk to you again. We've really, really enjoyed it.
It's been lovely. Thank you for asking me.
Good. Well, look, let's say goodbye to the audience. Bye.
Bye-bye.